Welcome to From Manuscript to Ministry, created and produced by Elder William Moore, the podcast where faith meets the written word. Each week, your hosts David and Martha dive into powerful, self-published books by Christian authors who are boldly using their God-given voices to impact the kingdom. Whether you're an aspiring writer, a reader seeking spiritual growth, or a ministry leader in search of authentic resources, this is your space to be inspired, encouraged, and equipped. Let's explore today's featured book and uncover the life-changing message behind the manuscript.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to understanding the insights that truly matters.
Hi, everyone.
Today, we're setting the stage for what I think is probably the most significant deep dive we can take. We're looking at lasting significance, essential value.
Yeah, the deep stuff.
Yeah.
We're talking legacy.
Exactly, but maybe not the kind you can measure easily, like with a house deed or, a bank statement.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. We're wrapping up our look at William Moore's devotional guide, Proverbs 31, empowering quotes for everyday motivation. And we're focusing today on the final chapters, right? 11 and 12.
That's it. Chapter 11 on endless influence and chapter 12, timeless inner beauty. These sections, they're really positioned as the definitive blueprint for a meaningful life, according to Moore.
So our mission for you today is to go beyond just the quotes on the page. We want to pull out the core insights from these last two chapters.
We really need to understand how Moore argues that, that true influence is rooted in others and real value is internal.
And how these two ideas together kind of build the framework for an enduring legacy.
What's really striking, right from the get-go, is how the text just lays it out there. This powerful statement that true influence, it lives on, often way beyond the external stuff, the achievements the world tends to celebrate.
Yeah, Moore seems to fundamentally shift the focus. It's less about what you did, the sort of measurable output.
And much more about who you were for other people, the relational deposits you made.
Which just sets up a pretty big challenge for our deep dive today, doesn't it? Yeah. Can we really embrace a definition of success that's, largely invisible?
That's the question.
Okay, let's unpack this. Chapter 11 kicks off with a foundational quote that's not just defining legacy. It feels like a direct challenge to how we normally think about career success, accumulation, all that. The core concept is, it's crystal clear, but it demands a huge shift in how we value our time, our resources, everything. Moore states it plainly. Her legacy is not in what she possessed, but in what she poured into others. It's such a beautifully simple statement, but powerful.
It elevates that relational impact above, material inventory.
Yeah.
And I love how active that phrasing is. Poured into others. It's not static.
Exactly.
It immediately makes legacy feel less like a fixed thing, like a tally mark on a timeline, and more like an active verb, a relational fluid thing.
The process.
So if we follow Moore's logic here, legacy is measured entirely by the impact, right?
Yeah.
And by the deposits made in human connection.
And it has nothing to do with the size of your house, your social status, or even, the job titles on your LinkedIn profile or your eventual obituary.
To really get how radical this is, we have to look at the contrast. Moore sets up. He's quite explicit about it.
He is. This virtuous woman, yes, she's famous for her actions, her business sense, how she cares for her household, all of that.
We've covered that in previous discussions.
Right. But the source really stresses that she's not ultimately known just for her incredible work ethic or her strength that you can see or her possessions.
So those things are just the means to an end. Moore argues they're more like the scaffolding of her life. They're how she lived, yes, but they aren't the finished structure, the enduring legacy itself.
Her real fame, then, her lasting memory, it's fundamentally relational.
It's relational, and it endures because it's carried forward by the people she served, the life she touched.
Okay, that brings us to the resilience question. We all know fortunes can vanish, right? Market crashes happen. Trends change ridiculously fast.
Faster than we can keep up sometimes.
So why does the source claim this kind of impact, the one made through personal deposits? Why doesn't that fade with fashion or fortune?
Well, because fashion definitely shifts. Market trends, they crash. Fortunes get spent or, diluted over generations. But the unique thing, the resilient quality of this kind of legacy, it's that it resides in the hearts she touched.
So it's less like a bank account.
Yeah.
And maybe more like genetic coding. Think about it. When you pour kindness or faith or wisdom or just genuine encouragement into someone else, that input becomes part of them. It changes how they operate.
It literally can change their response mechanisms. It alters their trajectory, potentially.
Okay, I see. It sounds almost like behavioral modification, but wrapped in grace.
In a way, yes. It changes their path. And then they carry that new code forward. They influence their own kids, their partners, their communities.
So because this influence gets replicated, transmitted across generations through changed behavior and belief, not through like selling an asset or writing a will.
Precisely. That's why it is, by definition, endless legacy. It becomes a kind of self-replicating system of positive influence, ideally.
That is compelling, but let's add some friction. The modern world, I mean, it demands material success just for survival.
Oh, absolutely. The pressure is immense.
We're constantly chasing deadlines, paying bills, juggling a million things. How on earth do we find the bandwidth to focus on pouring into others? And that's exactly where the core challenge of Chapter 11 lands. It hits hard with this profoundly reflective question for more. What are we pouring into others? It's a confronting question.
It's not just a challenge. It's like an immediate audit of our daily outputs, emotionally, relationally, more even outlines the different kinds of deposits we might be making.
Okay, what are they?
Well, on the positive thing, the source points to things like kindness, faith, and wisdom. These are, intentional, high-value, relational inputs.
The inputs that require effort.
They require presence, definitely.
Yeah.
Attention, and often, sacrificing your own immediate needs or wants in that moment. And then we get the reality check. The negative counterpoints that feel so painfully relevant today. Busyness and burnout. Ugh, yes. We really have to spend some time on this because this is where Moore is directly critiquing, I think, our current culture.
Busyness and burnout. That's often what we pour out instead of wisdom, isn't it?
So often. We're just so drained by the sheer relentless demands of our schedules that our relational deposits end up being zero, or worse, they're negative.
We leave behind friction, short tempers, exhaustion.
Right. We communicate, maybe without even saying a word, that the schedule, the task list, that's more important than the person standing right in front of us.
What strikes me here is that busyness isn't just a state we're in. It feels like an active choice sometimes. Prioritizing input demands, tasks coming at us over relational output.
That's a great way to put it. You're so busy receiving that you have nothing left to give relationally.
Yeah.
And the insight from the source here connects current action directly to future consequence. It says our actions today become the seeds of legacy for tomorrow.
So if we sow busyness,
we leave behind a memory of someone who was unavailable, stressed, always focused elsewhere. A legacy defined by absence, essentially.
wow.
But if we intentionally sow wisdom or kindness, even if it's just for 5 minutes a day, as Moore suggests later, that seed can keep bearing fruit long after we're gone.
So Moore is forcing us to see that the investment portfolio of our soul, if you will, it's measured in attention and presence.
Exactly. Not in dollars or how packed your calendar is.
So the first step towards building this endless influence is just recognizing that the biggest threat isn't really failure in the traditional sense. It's simply being too distracted to show up for people.
That seems to be the core message.
Yeah.
Exactly. And recognizing that naturally leads us into the next part, the actual mechanism of influence. How do you do it?
Right.
Which Moore describes in, well, surprisingly practical terms. He takes it beyond just the philosophical idea of legacy and really grounds it in things you can actually do.
And I think the beauty of this section is how it sort of democratizes legacy building, makes it accessible.
How so?
Well, we often think of influence as needing, a huge platform, a microphone, a big stage, a corporate title.
Right, something grand.
But the source really highlights the power of small encouragement and notes that even the smallest acts of encouragement can echo for generations. That really takes the pressure off needing some grand gesture, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's the ripple effect principle, but applying to human connection.
Yeah.
And Moore really wants us to see the long-term generational payoff.
Can you give an example of how that might work? A small act echoing.
Sure. Think about a seemingly tiny moment of support. Maybe a teacher takes, 30 seconds to genuinely praise a struggling student's unique drawing style, something others might overlook.
Okay.
That little bit of validation might just make that student think, okay, my different way of seeing things is actually okay. It might stop them from shutting down creatively.
And decades later,
maybe that person starts an innovative architectural firm or a successful design studio or anything where that unique vision matters. That initial tiny moment of support now has this cascading impact across generations through their employees, their clients, their own family.
Wow. It's like the difference between just dropping a pebble in a pond and without knowing it, changing the entire course of a river downstream.
That's a great analogy. That's the potential more seasoned small acts.
Okay, but I want to push back a little. In a world obsessed with optimizing everything, ticking boxes, how do we make sure that small encouragement is genuine? That it's not just another quick transactional checkbox exercise?
That's a really important question.
Because the idea of small acts could easily become shallow, fleeting interactions if the heart isn't really in it, right?
That is a critical challenge. You're absolutely right. And I think that's precisely why Moore doesn't just leave this as a nice thought. He immediately tackles that potential for shallowness by giving a very immediate, tangible, and importantly, achievable action. Something designed specifically to fight that tendency towards relational inertia or superficiality. He calls it the 5-minute challenge.
Okay, let's break this down for everyone listening, because this is the really practical takeaway from this part of the source.
Right.
The challenge sounds almost deceptively simple. Just take 5 minutes, only 5, to intentionally speak life into someone. It's not about solving their big problems.
No, not at all. It's purely about intentionality replacing the inertia of busyness. It's about creating one specific moment of pure, positive deposit.
And the methods are simple, too, very accessible. What does he suggest?
Things like a quick prayer for someone, or sending a thoughtful, personalized text message, something specific to them.
And who are the potential recipients?
The source casts a really wide net here. It could be your child, your partner, a colleague, maybe a friend you haven't connected with in a while, or even a stranger you notice who seems to be struggling.
It really does democratize legacy building then, because the barrier to entry is just 5 minutes of focused, intentional attention. Anyone can find 5 minutes, hopefully. And this is where we need to look closely at the label. Moore gives this simple activity, he calls it, that's legacy work. Why assign such huge value to something so brief? Legacy work sounds so significant.
I think it's because it directly bypasses those big structural problems we talked about, busyness and burnout. In that 5-minute window, you ensure the deposit being made is intentionally positive. It's faith or kindness or wisdom, hopefully untainted by the stress of your task list.
It's a deliberate investment of attention.
A non-negotiable, intentional investment. It proves, in Moore's view, that legacy isn't only built in grand projects or, epic life achievements. It's built in the accumulation, the aggregate of these small, repeated investments of genuine affirmation and support.
So the intentionality is what makes the action sacred, almost, regardless of how short it is.
That seems to be the idea.
And if you actually committed to doing that 5 minutes every single day, over a year, that's 365 intentional moments of positive influence that would completely undermine a potential legacy defined only by absence or stress.
Exactly. It transforms this potentially overwhelming concept of building a legacy into a measurable daily task. It establishes a practice. And practice is really the only way to solidify those deeper qualities that Moore then focuses on in the next chapter, the internal architecture that makes that 5-minute action feel genuine and heartfelt rather than just, transactional.
That's a perfect bridge. So if influence is the external overflow, what's the internal structure that actually creates that endless stream? We move to the final chapter, chapter 12.
Here, the source shifts the focus entirely inward. It addresses the qualities that define lasting value, lasting beauty, and the core theme is this really clear mandate. Her beauty isn't loud, it's lived. This statement really completes the picture of the virtuous woman Moore has been building. It provides the anchor for everything else.
How so?
Well, the source argues that the glow of this woman, it kind of comes full circle in this chapter. It's the validation that all those external achievements we discussed, the work, the industry, the good reputation, they were actually the point of her life.
They were just the expression of something deeper.
Exactly. They are the authentic expression of a profound internal reality. It's a really necessary emphasis on the internal over the external, especially given the pressures of our modern, very visible world.
Okay, so if her beauty isn't loud, if it's not trying to get attention, not based on physical looks or some fleeting trend, what is it based on fundamentally?
The source identifies the core driver as heart posture.
Heart posture. That's a term that feels like it needs some unpacking. What does Moore mean by that?
Yeah, heart posture is maybe the most critical term in this whole final section. It's not talking about a temporary feeling, like being happy one day and sad the next.
Okay.
It speaks more to your inherent orientation toward the world, your fundamental disposition, the place from which your thoughts and actions consistently flow.
Like your default setting.
Sort of. It's the deep underlying set of beliefs, maybe biases, and definitely the intentional commitments that determine how you react. How you react to pressure, to success, to failure, to everything. So Moore is basically saying, true, lasting beauty is the actual architectural blueprint of her inner life. Something stable, designed to weather storms. Precisely. It's stable and designed.
That's powerful. It suggests that if your heart posture is, say, gratitude, then your external expression will tend towards kindness, even when you're stressed.
Right. Or if your default heart posture is anxiety, maybe your outward expression is that constant busyness, regardless of how much external success you actually achieve.
Okay, I get it.
And Moore gets very specific about the durable materials used in building this internal architecture. He breaks down the qualities of this lived beauty, giving us 4 key characteristics that make up that enduring inner glow.
We probably shouldn't rush past these. They sound like the real substance here.
They really are. They form the internal commission, as he calls it later. Okay, let's look at each one. The first 2 often seem linked. Quiet courage and gentle wisdom.
Yeah, quiet courage. That's crucial because it distinguishes real resilience from just, recklessness or maybe even loudness.
How so?
It suggests a strength that doesn't need to boast. It doesn't need constant validation. It certainly isn't looking for confrontation. It acts when principle requires it.
Like a moral backbone that stands firm without needing to make a big show of it.
Exactly. It stands firm in adversity but doesn't generate unnecessary drama around it. And then gentle wisdom. That means having intelligence, having insight, but always tempering it with empathy.
So it's not just about being right. No. It's knowing the right thing, maybe, but delivering it with the kindness and humility the other person needs to actually hear it and receive it. It's understanding the human element, not just having the facts. That makes sense. Okay, and the next pair seems to focus more on endurance. Faith under fire and peace that passes understanding. Yes, faith under fire speaks directly to that resilience piece. This isn't the faith of convenience, when everything's going great.
Right.
This is the faith that stays operational, that still functions when circumstances are tough, chaotic, maybe even devastating. It implies a really deeply rooted spiritual system that doesn't just shatter when external structures start to collapse.
And the peace that passes understanding.
That feels like the ultimate sign of true internal alignment, doesn't it? It's that ability to maintain composure, focus, a sense of non-reactivity, almost regardless of the level of chaos swirling around you externally.
It signals a reliance on something deeper than just the immediate situation.
Yeah, a foundational reliance that goes beyond circumstance.
Okay, these 4 qualities: quiet courage, gentle wisdom, faith under fire, peace. They're clearly not things you can just buy or apply like makeup.
Not at all. They have to be forged, developed over time, practiced consistently.
Which leads directly to the source's conclusion about where this real value, this beauty comes from. It comes from what she believes and how she behaves, right? Not just how she looks.
That's the ultimate statement on self-worth within this framework. What you choose to believe fundamentally shapes your behavior. And your consistent behavior over time defines that internal architecture, your lived beauty.
It completely disconnects true value from appearance or physical ability or even what other people think of you.
Completely. And if you connect this back to Chapter 11 about influence, it becomes really clear why her influence is described as endless.
How so?
Because her influence is simply the natural overflow of these established, internal, timeless qualities. You can't consistently pour wisdom into others if you haven't first quietly cultivated it within yourself.
Right, you can't give what you don't have, essentially.
Essentially.
Yeah.
And the source then takes a necessary pause here to place this internal focus in contrast with, well, modern life.
Yeah, what's the critique there? The source's observation is pretty sharp, quite critical. We live in a culture obsessed with the surface. Hard to argue with that.
No. It's a critique of the modern aesthetic where visibility, superficial achievements, getting instant external validation, that's king. Our economy rewards the immediate, the visible, the loud.
But Moore offers a counterfocus, a definitive counterfocus that really grounds the whole devotional. But God is always developing the soul. Okay, so that implies an ongoing process.
An ongoing, internal, and often very quiet process that completely ignores those superficial demands of the culture. The work is developmental, it's persistent, and it's entirely focused on the unseen core, the source of that quiet courage and gentle wisdom we talked about.
It fundamentally shifts the focus again, doesn't it? Away from achieving some kind of external perfection.
And towards achieving continuous growth and deep resilience in the spirit, in the soul. If the culture demands loud perfection right now, the source reminds us that true, eternal development is quiet, it's constant, and it focuses on that underlying soul structure.
And that structure takes time, patience,
Right.
and probably hardship sometimes to build.
Often hardship, yes.
Okay, so if the soul is constantly being developed, that implies work. It implies maintenance, intentionality. Chapter 12 then concludes with what feels like a spiritual maintenance plan,
That's a good way to put it.
using this fantastic analogy for self-care that goes way beyond just, taking a bubble bath.
Right, the analogy of the inner garden. And it's crucial to see this isn't a passive metaphor. A garden requires work,
Right.
continuous labor.
Yeah, you can't just ignore it and expect flowers. Exactly. So the final reflective questions that Moore poses to the listener, they use this imagery. They really push for active self-assessment. Are you nurturing your inner garden? And very specifically, is your face being fed daily? Nurturing an inner garden that requires vigilance, right?
Right.
Weeding out bad thoughts, pruning distractions, daily watering. It has to be prioritized. It's active work.
And then the source hits us with that killer contrast, the one every single listener probably needs to hear. Are you tending to your spirit the way you tend to your schedule? That is the ultimate confrontation of modern priorities, isn't it? And it feels like the key to solving that whole busyness burnout problem from Chapter 11.
How so?
Well, think about how meticulous, maybe even obsessive we can be about our external schedule. Meetings, deadlines, appointments, kids' activities.
Yeah.
We manage it all.
Right down to the minute sometimes.
But that very focus often generates the exhaustion and emotional deficit we pour out onto others. Yet the source implies that the inner garden, the actual source of our quiet courage and peace, is often left untended, fallow, unwatered, maybe overrun with weeds. So if I actually treated my inner health, my spiritual well-being, with the same rigor I treat my 9:00 a.m. meeting, like it's non-negotiable, essential, demands my full attention, my whole day, my whole output would have to shift. It would have to. But that requires a fundamental belief shift first, doesn't it? Believing that the inner work is actually more important, or at least equally important, as the external logistics.
Yeah. You have to believe it matters just as much, if not more.
Absolutely. The implication is clear. We need to apply the same discipline, the same non-negotiable time allocation to tending the spirit that we currently give to managing the schedule. Because if we don't schedule it,
It probably doesn't happen.
or it gets the leftover scraps of our energy, and then the legacy of busyness inevitably wins out.
And Moore makes it clear this level of commitment isn't just a nice idea, a suggestion. It's framed as more than that.
Yes, he highlights the source's framing of the book's conclusion. It's not presented as a final stop, like, okay, you've read it, period. It's framed as a forward-looking commission.
A commission, what does that imply?
Well, commission implies responsibility, right? It implies authority, and it definitely implies continued movement, continued action.
So the virtuous life isn't a destination you reach when you finish the book.
No, it's a way of living that demands action after the book is closed. Yeah. You've been equipped, Moore seems to say, and now you need to go and act on it.
And to make that commission really actionable, Moore then lists specific practical capabilities, things he attributes to the listener, reminding us we're still equipped for this journey, no matter our age or situation.
Yeah, he focuses on 3 really active roles that define the living expression of this cultivated inner beauty. He emphasizes the continuous output of that nurtured soul.
What are they?
Your hands can still build, your voice can still comfort, and your heart can still guide.
Build, comfort, guide.
It means that you, the listener, having nourished that inner garden, you're now empowered to engage with the world. Using your unique talents, that's the building. Using your relational maturity, that's the comforting. And using your inner wisdom, that's the guiding.
So these are the visible outputs of that internal heart posture we talked about, ensuring the legacy of influence actually continues.
Exactly. It keeps it active, keeps it flowing outward.
And finally, the source pulls it all together. A powerful synthesis of influence and rootedness. This feels like the ultimate takeaway from the whole text. It really ties the 2 final chapters together perfectly. The final premise is stated as, your influence can be endless when rooted in God. Endless influence when rooted.
Yes. The endless nature of the legacy described in Chapter 11, the pouring into others, it's presented as entirely dependent on that stable internal architecture, beauty, and faith developed in Chapter 12, the tended inner garden.
So without that deep root, the influence just doesn't have the resilience. It won't last through time or changing fortunes.
That's the argument. The influence lives on because the source of that influence is presented as eternal and something that needs to be diligently maintained through that inner work.
Wow. That was quite a journey through Moore's architecture of lasting value. If we just step back for a second, trying to synthesize the key takeaways. It's really clear Moore's text completely redefines success, doesn't it? It moves it from the external column way over to the internal ledger.
Yeah, legacy really gets boiled down to two core pillars in these chapters. First, that intentional pouring into others, those deposits of kindness, faith, wisdom, often through small, deliberate acts like that 5-minute challenge.
Okay, that's pillar one.
And second, that eternal value comes from inner beauty, which isn't superficial, but defined by those forged qualities like quiet courage and gentle wisdom. The external work, the influence, it's really just the evidence of that internal commitment.
Yeah. And the source leaves us with some powerful affirmations, too, grounding this commission in a sense of inherent worth.
The constant reminder seems to be, your value is eternal, your voice matters, your faith matters. And I think, perhaps most beautifully, that your quiet strength, that internal stuff, is actually the most reliable kind. And it is noticed, it's not forgotten. The final aspiration, then, is this vision where the legacy lasts precisely because the Spirit reflects that true internal glory.
Yeah, it's a real encouragement to pursue the unseen work first, because that's presented as the only solid foundation for any kind of enduring external impact, something far surpassing anything you could just list on a resume.
But I want to circle back to that really fascinating contrast more, Drew, the one between tending to your spirit and tending to your schedule.
Yeah, that one hits hard. We talked about how our daily scheduled commitments often lead to those negative deposits, busyness, burnout. If true legacy, according to Moore, is built on what we pour into others, how often does the very structure of our hyper-scheduled lives actively contradict the time needed to nurture that quiet courage and gentle wisdom the source advocates for?
I think that contradiction is often silent, but potentially catastrophic for the kind of legacy Moore describes. When we consistently prioritize the schedule, which is usually reactive, driven by external demands over the spirit, which requires proactive internal discipline, we are, maybe unintentionally, structurally guaranteeing the failure of that deeper legacy.
Can you give an example?
Well, if you schedule, say, a high-stakes business meeting for 3 hours, meticulously prepare for it, but you only manage to allot maybe 5 minutes of exhausted silence at the very end of the day to feeding your faith or cultivating inner peace.
You're sending a clear message about priorities, even just to yourself.
You're prioritizing the external yield, the logistical demand from your boss or client, over the internal resilience, the spiritual demand of your own soul, as Moore might put it. So the provocative thought for listeners then becomes, what tangible shifts would actually result if we genuinely started treating the maintenance of that inner garden with the same non-negotiable rigor we apply to our most critical external appointments? It would require a huge mental reclassification, wouldn't it? Seeing spiritual maintenance not as a luxury, but as high stakes, essential infrastructure for everything else.
So instead of fitting it in if there's time,
It would mean actually scheduling, say, 30 minutes for intentional solitude or prayer or faith study, and then treating a phone call trying to interrupt that time the same way you'd treat someone trying to barge into a vital client presentation.
as a disruption to non-negotiable work.
Exactly. This shift means the inner garden work stops being a luxury for when everything else is finally done and becomes the essential fuel required to successfully and healthily execute everything else on your schedule.
It suggests that the real legacy work doesn't just begin when we send that 5-minute text.
No.
It actually begins when we carve out the hour needed to cultivate the quiet courage and gentle wisdom that ensures that text is genuine, full of substance, and truly life-giving.
Absolutely. I think the final challenge from William Moore isn't just to read or understand these principles. It's to actually live them out by fundamentally reprioritizing that internal investment. The source material serves as this resounding reminder that you are called to build, comfort, and guide. And that whole journey towards a truly lasting legacy, it starts quietly, right there, within your own heart posture.
Thank you for joining us today on From Manuscript to Ministry. If today's featured book encouraged, challenged, or inspired you, we invite you to take the next step, purchase a copy, and support the author behind the message. When you invest in their work, you're not just buying a book, you're sowing into good ground and helping advance the kingdom of God through faith-filled storytelling. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs it. Your support helps these powerful voices reach even further. Until next time, keep reading, keep writing, keep praying, and keep walking boldly in your calling. God is still turning manuscripts into ministries.